Derek Hopper with Principal Sloan, and today we are excited to bring you a brand new product in the FlexiBRITE Gen 2. Throughout this video, we are going to be spending some time showing you the various features, the upgrades from previous generations, as well as some helpful tips when it comes to doing basic installations with these products. FlexiBRITE Gen 2 is going to be our go-to solution for any of those customers that you have out there that are looking for any kind of architectural wrapping of their building in various profiles, cove lighting, or more importantly, depending on the application, you can even use it for a faux neon look to get that retro look they all crave. With FlexiBRITE Gen 2 being the latest generation of our long line of flexible products, we wanted to make sure that we took all the feedback that we've heard from you out in the field and introduce it to make your life simpler when using this product moving forward. As always, we have our outstanding layout service that can take any drawings or dimensional drawings you have of buildings for whatever application you might want to use this for, and they can provide you with drawings and a full bill of materials with everything you need, including power supplies and exact cut lengths of these products so that you can hand it directly to your distributor for easy quoting. In the past, we have made this where in order to maintain your warranty, you have had to let Principal Sloan do all of the cutting, sealing, and soldering of the wire leads in-house. This has been great because it has allowed you guys to be able to take the full kit and just go out to install these without having to measure or worry about anything else other than your installation on site. One thing we've heard though is that occasionally we know that how something is designed and how something is built are not always exactly the same. So field cutting became an issue. We did loosen up a few years ago and make it where you could at least do termination endpoints, but that still made it difficult when it came to wanting to buy in bulk and not having excess scrap. So to that end, we combined the features from our Sloan FlexiBRITE24 with the wire leads in that method that they use on that product to be able to make this field cuttable. So when you get your layout, you no longer have to rely on Principal Sloan if you're on a time crunch for those to come in pre-cut. You can order in 24-foot reels, and these all have cut sections that are much tighter and wire gaps that happen every 18 inches that allow you in the field to cut these and seal them as needed without having to worry about your measurements being exactly right every single time. We did loosen up a few years ago by allowing termination end caps to be done in the field while maintaining the warranty. However, we did hear the feedback that it still made it difficult to justify buying in bulk because there would be excess scrap in certain situations. With the features that we're going to go over today and the changes in the wiring method that we made to this new generation, that is no longer going to be a problem. There are going to be many different access points to be able to do power injection on this to mitigate any kind of excess scrap that there could have been in the past. These are tighter cut sections available, and the wiring injections are every 10 inches on all of these products to allow for maximum versatility. Now, let's jump into all the options. What exactly is this product, and what are some of the changes that you can look for compared to old generations? So starting out, the FlexiBRITE Gen 2 is going to come in 3 different profiles: a back bend, a side bend, and a wide. Now, when it comes to applications and what you can use them for, the back bend and the wide are going to be very identical in their application. As you can see, there's a profile difference, and there is going to be a brightness difference with that goes hand in hand with the run footage. But these are going to be what you want to use anytime you are trying to do a border on a product or a building of any kind. We've seen this used in signage applications where for an extra pop of color or brightness or just a different feature to distinguish their sign, they've gone around the external return of the cabinet in order to draw even more attention to it. If they want it to be extra vibrant and bright, they can go with the brighter output, which is the smaller back bend. If they want to go with the more muted feature or the more, subtle one, you can go with the wide. We developed this one to be used in those applications so that when you have signage, that this does not outshine the rest of your backlit sign that you're using to draw attention to your business. The side bend similarly could be used for any kind of border tubing, especially depending on the orientation that it's mounted. Starting with the different profiles and their features, the side bend is going to be your go-to whenever you're trying to do any kind of script letter or design on the face of a building or any kind of surface that's facing you. If this is your mounting plane, then you're able to come in and do anything you need to. These have a very tight bend radius, and all of this is programmed, as I mentioned before, into our wizard program to allow for these designs to be done ahead of time. One of the newest features on these products, especially with back bend and side bend, is the increase in the cut resolution compared to old generations. In the past, these products have had a 100 millimeter or just under 4-inch cut increment, which made it very difficult to do more intricate designs and to avoid gaps when in your completed product. This new design is cuttable every 8.3 millimeters, which is just about 1/3 of an inch. So there's no reason you can't get as tight or go crazy with the designs that you want to achieve now. This is also available on the back bend. The back bend and the wide have similar bending radiuses and profiles as previously mentioned. This is going to be when you want to use a border accentuating your building and could go along the top. If you're mounting it on the front of the building facing at you, it even has the ability to make these rounded corners for a seamless transition without having to do a butt splice. Now, while the back bend can do a 90-degree around those corners, you may have to do a butt splice when it comes to the wide, as it cannot make those 90s. But any building with a decent radius should be able to maintain that continuous look around corners. Now that we've introduced you to all the features that are going to be available in the FlexiBRITE Gen 2, we want to dive a little bit deeper and show you all of those details in more detail, as well as showing you the tips and tricks we have for the best practices of installation. First step in any of the process, if you're doing this in the field or doing this by yourself, is going to be cutting the product. So once you have your measurements made, you're going to come through, start at one end, and then using the cut marks, get to the closest one that you can without going over. Think of it as the Price is Right. So if your dimension ends at 4 inches and the cut increment at 4 inches lands between one, go one shorter, because if you go longer, you are going to end up where it may not fit into the track or whatever application you're trying to use it on. So I would say go slightly under, and especially now that these cut increments are every 1/3 of an inch, it's negligible compared to what it has been in the past when it was a 4-inch cut section. When you are doing that, a key thing to remember is that if you are using, say this is side bend, right now the one we're looking at is our back bend. But if this was side bend and you were doing script letters, let's say the serif on an I or any kind of cursive letter, you do have situations where you may end up with a very short piece that you need in order to complete that portion of it, whether it's crossing a T, dotting an I, anything that you can think of. There are times where you could end up with a piece that lands between two cut sections. It is important that if you have that situation, that you end up using a little bit of scrap to ensure that you always have some kind of power injection. If you don't, then that piece is going to be completely scrapped, as you will have no way to power this up. So all those in mind, first thing you're going to do is measure, as I said, and then you're going to use some kind of snip. Personally, our go-to is a pipe cutter, a PVC pipe cutter here in-house. It cradles the material very well. It usually has a good blade, and you can cut through it like butter. Another tip that I'm going to give you guys is that if you have the marks, that's going to be where the light engine inside is mounted. If you're trying to come straight down on it, it can be a little hard to get through because it is light tape inside. So you're going to want to cut at a perpendicular angle. So if this has where my light engine is, I want to turn it on its side, place it down, make sure that my blade is lined up with the cut mark, and then come straight down. And as you can see, I've now gone straight through, and I have a nice clean piece to work with. Now that we have our piece cut with the power injection in place and making sure that we have one, we're going to go to the next step, which is sealing both of these terminated ends. So as you can see, now that we've cut it, there is a void that needs to be taken care of, because we do not want to simply put on our end cap without making sure that we have something to protect any kind of ingress of that glue that we're going to put on from getting inside. What can happen with that is if you don't put what we call our silicone inserts prior to putting on the end cap, that glue can get in there and it can discolor any of the LEDs it gets on. So especially with white, you're going to end up with a 65K, a 5,000, a 4,000, whatever you ordered, but that one on the end, you're going to get this blue spot at the end. So it's important that you use these. Now, These are very small, but they come in the kits for all of the end caps. So when you get your end cap kits, it's going to have the glue that I'm about to show you, these inserts that are unique to each profile. So the side bend, the back bend, and the wide all have unique ones on that, just like they have unique end caps. You're going to go in and you're going to orient it and just slide it in. So it should be pretty snug. It's not going to be something that is just snap in, but because they're both soft, you can manipulate these pretty easily. You can see on the side, it holds it in place. And once you do have that, you're going to be taking the glue that comes with each of our end cap kits. Open it up. Going to apply the glue. You can be pretty liberal with this, but you don't need to go overboard either. You know, you've got the surfaces on the side that you want to get, and then you want to spread it around on the bottom. But because you've got that insert, it's not going to go anywhere. And don't worry, any of the stuff that does push out when you secure this in place is going to be easily cleaned up with anything as simple as a rag or a paper towel or a shop towel, anything that you might have on hand. So with the glue on the end cap and the silicone end cap in place, you just want to orient it, because one of the new features, because we had to add the track on the bottom of the profile here to account for the wires, these have a specific spot where, you know, top is top, bottom is bottom, and you just slide it right on. Now, it is going to be critical that when you are cutting, you try to make your cut as flush as possible and at a 90-degree angle, because if you get these where they are at a slant or anything, it could prevent the end cap from sitting perfectly in place. And there are a couple different options that you have when it comes to letting this set. So the glue itself will take about 2 hours from the time you put it on for it to completely cure. So if you're in the shop ahead of time and you were able to go out and do some field measurements, but you're still wanting to do this yourself, then you can use something as simple as 2x4s and a clamp to keep these pressured and in place. But if you don't have that luxury and you're trying to do this out in the field, something as simple as just taking some electrical tape and then putting it around the end, pulling it tight so that you are flush as possible, and then putting it back on itself and letting it sit like that for a few hours is more than enough. Quick important note when it comes to cutting and sealing the side bend product. While the inserts are going to be applicable to the side bend no matter what you're doing on either side, the actual end caps do have a left and right orientation. Again, these are notated on the kits when you receive them for this product, so there's no need to worry about trying to keep track of it. But because the light engine is mounted on this end, this wall is thicker on the bottom compared to this side. So having them oriented correctly and having the correct ones are going to be critical to making sure this is sealed properly. Now, once you have it cut and sealed, you're going to have to do the next step, which is, unlike the old versions where you have a pre-wired end cap, you are going to need to add your own wire whips to these. Now, because the power injection wires are available every 10 inches on these products, you're most likely going to end up with a cut piece that has multiple of these on it. So the question then becomes, where should I do it? And that's part of the freedom of this new generation. It's completely up to you. If in the middle of a run, you need to penetrate through your wall because that's where you have your penetration points for your power supplies, then you can very easily go to the nearest cut section, snip them as we're about to go through and demonstrate how to do, add your wire and then run through that way. Or for the sake of convenience, because it's what you're used to, you can make sure that your cuts are always closest to the nearest power injection and wire it from there. Which side of this you cut on, again, completely up to you. If you need your wires to go out this direction, then you can cut on this side and put on your leads there. If you need it to go down the other way, then it is completely up to you on how this is done. But next, we're going to get into how those cuts happen when you do decide where you want to make those. Now that we've decided which of the power injections we want to go with, we're going to go through the steps that you need to take in order to make sure you can use these with a wire whip and the different methods we recommend in order to accomplish that. So for this example, I'm going to come in and I'm going to make my disconnects from here. Strip them back. And from there, we can take our wire and do one of the following. So what we can do is show you the different options that we recommend, because now that the wires are going to travel inside the track or adjacent to it, depending on which one you're using, whether it's the flex chain or the track or the clips, you're going to have some different ways that you can do it that we think are going to be more beneficial and more advantageous compared to some of the others. So first one is, I'm sure you guys have seen a lot of these before. These are the solderless heat shrinks. These have a ring of solder in the middle that you just use a heat gun and it creates a bond around the wires themselves. You overlap them in the middle where they're stripped back, and then the solder melts from the heat gun until you have a secure connection. Additionally, you can go back old school and use the butt splice connectors. These are easy to use. You use these along with the crimp, available at any hardware store for ease of use and accessibility in the field in case you come up and are short of a couple pieces or parts. Our favorite recommendation is going to be if you're in the shop and you're able to plan ahead, get the measurements that you need, and cut all of these in-house before going out to the job site, is simply soldering them together. You can make the connection right here. You can see we have our 18 gauge bonded jacketed wire, but what you use is entirely up to you. As long as it is properly rated for class 2 and is going through, you have a protection going through any kind of penetration point you have, or whatever other requirements, depending on the environment in which you're installing these, you can use what you need to. The other thing that we need you to really consider is referencing the wiring diagram we have on the Principal Sloan website on the power supply page, because depending on how far away your power supplies are from where you're power injecting, you may have to change the gauge of wire. Right here, we're using 18. That's going to give you about 40 feet of distance that you can run between the product and the power supply. If you need to go beyond that, you may consider jumping to a 16 or a 14 if it's that much of a difference. One last critical step when you're doing your power injection and your wiring, once you have your wires on, one thing that's going to be easy to forget, but is critical that you go back and do and double check before installing these, is on the opposite side of those wires where you cut to get your leads, you need to go back with a weather-rated silicone, and you need to just put a little dab over both of those and make sure that they are covered so that you do not get any kind of water ingress that can lead to corrosion and shorting of the product. Now that all of our prep work is done on the Flex product itself, whether it's the cutting, the capping, the sealing, and making sure you have plenty of wire lead for the next part of the installation, we're going to move on to installing the track and installing the product into the track. So each of the products are going to have 3 different options available. There is a clear UV stabilized clip that could be used for freehanding. It also is going to be great for applications where you want the product to stand out itself without having the mounting accessory necessarily steal the show or get in the way of seeing the product, especially when it comes to some of the applications using the colors where you want it to shine blue at night and show blue during the day, or any of the other colors. This is going to be a great use for that. You also have what we call the flex chain. This is going to allow you for uneven surfaces, particularly anything that you may have with a curve, go through and mount this ahead of time, and it will form factor to the curvature of the face that you're mounting to. And then last but not least, all of them also come in a standard track. So this is going to be very straightforward. You're going to more or less do a chalk line on a straight surface and then go through and put these in place. Couple of notes for each of these. For both the clip and the flex chain, these are going to have to be well thought out ahead of time, especially on the chain for the side bend product, because you will have to know the drawing, the outline, everything ahead of time. Once that product is in place, you're no longer able to mount the track itself. You can see the mounting holes for the for the track are actually at the bottom here. So these will have to go through and have them put in place ahead of time. For the side bend in particular, when you're doing this, depending on the tight nature of the curve that you're trying to achieve, you may have to go in with a screw on every single one of these holes. Other times though, if you're doing more of a straight run, you can get away with going every others. This is going to be very situational, and you're going to have to make sure to plan ahead and play with it ahead of time, because as you torque these down, they do have a tendency to curve a little bit. So you're going to have to finesse it as you do the installations. Similar to what we just mentioned with the Flex, the clips and their usage, especially when used with the side bend, are going to depend on the application and design that you're going for. You may need more, you may need less. It all depends on what you're trying to achieve. These are a little bit more forgiving than the chain because they're not all connected. So you can place these one at a time into the surface in the design you're going for, move it around, see if you need to add another one. And because this clip is a friction fit that is snug over the top, if you do need to go back and make any changes, or you decide you need to add another clip in there, taking this out is not overly difficult and it will not harm the product. Moving on to the chains, these are going to be less forgiving, as I mentioned earlier, because they are coming in 1 meter pieces that are going to be needed to have adjustments on how many secure points they have based on the application. It is a little bit less forgiving on some of the security. So once this is in place, it can come out, but you do run the risk because of the cleats on the side ripping into some of the side portions of the product. None of the side portions on any of the products are lit, so this is going to be purely aesthetic, and the walls are thick enough that it is not going to cause any kind of water ingress or failures in there. But pulling the product in and out over and over again in this does run the risk of, depending on how you're pulling it or what force you're using, it could break the light engine inside. So we always advise being as careful as possible, and especially when you're using and putting Flex in long runs, to use a two-man team. Start with one side, and once it's in, just work your way down. And finally, when we're getting to the tracks, mounting these are, as I said, very straightforward. Snap a chalk line, run it down, secure it in place. You will notice that on the track, there are no pre-drilled holes on any of this. And the reason for that is that we know that there are going to be applications where you were cutting these down to size, and we didn't want to run the risk of having pre-drilled holes that ended up getting lobbed off because you were trying to make sure that you utilized as much of your material as possible without scrap. So once you have it to size, or even if it's the full size, what we recommend for the 1 meter pieces is a minimum of 3 security points. So you can just center tap one and then evenly space the second 2 between the ends and that center hole. Once those are in place, just like we did with the track, we can come through starting on one end. And just rolling it down. Thank you for joining us as we go over our FlexiBRITE Gen 2 today. For any additional questions or resources, please go to principalsloan.com.